Today we're going to go over these new Epoch 460 amp hour lithium batteries with the Victron Comms. But before I get started, I just have to say this channel is a DIY channel. So I document my DIY details on my boat and my systems and my improvements so that I can share it with everybody else in the hopes that they might find some useful information. What this channel is not, and what I'm not doing, I'm not an expert. So on this type of stuff, I just want to clarify that you should not take anything that I say as gospel or as an expert. I'm just going to show you what I know, what I think I know anyways. If you're thinking about doing something similar, you should do your own research. I would suggest you do is take what I've said and then go verify. Because I've been drinking from a fire hose of information for about 4 weeks now regarding Victron stuff, Cerbo GX, Multi-Plus 2, smart chargers, whatever, shunts, and then later on decided to have the Victron Comms. All right, so just beware of your own information. Don't take mine as gospel. And in addition, actually, some of this is probably bound to be incorrect, or at least slightly incorrect. So if you get any additional information or have anything to add that's useful to the conversation for systems like this, please add it in the comments below. Hopefully we can use this video as a placeholder to discuss the finer points of Epoch batteries, how to employ them with Victron stuff, and best practices. All right, so let's get on to the next thing. All right, so these are the new Epoch 460 amp hour marine batteries. You can use them for anything, but these are good for marine batteries. They have this IP67 case. It's fantastic. It's a really great marine case. You can even submerge them. There's a video, I think Lithium Solar submerged one of the 12 volt 100 amp hour versions underwater and then took it apart, and there was no water ingress. So great for marine use. Comes with a bunch of stuff, including, it came with these cables. I'm not sure what size these cables are. I mean, they're pretty big. They might be 4/0, they might be 2, I'm not quite sure. And these Anderson cables. So these Anderson cables are rated at 350 amps, I think. I actually purchased another set so that I might use these. I might actually attach them to the battery themselves and then make it so that I can disconnect them quickly if I ever need to disconnect them quickly. A lot of people complain about Anderson connectors. I think I'm going to use them at first, and I have a infrared camera, and we'll put big loads on them in the boat and scan these connectors to see if there's any excessive heat or high resistance in any way. So anyways, it came with these big nice cables. They're very nice, super nice, and these mounting screws which actually go down here on the side. So you got a lot of different ways you'll be able to mount it, with regular straps or with L brackets on the side there, however you want to mount it. All right, now it also comes with these energy meters, which is just a 10 segment LED. And unlike a golf cart, if you're familiar, some people are familiar with these in golf carts, but they aren't worth a darn in a golf cart, because as soon as you have 10 segments lit up, and as soon as you have one go down or two go down, you're on borrowed time. But this is not like that. These are accurate 10 segments, each meaning 10%. So if you got 5 segments left, you should be somewhere around 50%. And these have a long cable. I'm not going to show it right now, but it's got a very long cable, so you should be able to mount it in a good location to where you can just instantly scan these for a quick reference, which is very useful. One of the things I really like is this remote on-off switch. Again, should be on a boat or a camper or something like that, should be able to mount it in a very convenient location. This is like a momentary switch, so you have to hold it for a second, and then both of these go out. Hold it again, and they will come on. All right, so that's very useful. I have the Touch 50 Victron screen, and I will mount that somewhere convenient, and I will put each of these items close to it so that I can turn batteries off and on as I need to, whatever. Now, of course, these batteries also have Bluetooth. As a matter of fact, let me pull that up here. Hold on. All right, so here's a look at the app. Let me see if I can get this glare off here. Okay, here's a look at the app. It's a very good app. Shows total voltage up there, total amperage, charge time remaining, individual cell information. The one on the far right over this is 0.007. That's a really good thing to reference from time to time, because that shows the total voltage difference between the 4 cells down there. It also has temperatures, and this currently has 1 charge cycle. It shows the capacity right there. It shows 482 amp hours of 460. Epoch uses top-notch cells, so it's not unusual to see some of their batteries read right at 460, 465, or as high as 482. That's a really good one. Other information is contained in there as well. One other thing about these batteries is they are internally heated. You can charge them in cold weather. There's nothing special about the cells. The cells, you cannot charge them in cold weather, but this battery is a smart battery. When the temperature gets below a certain amount, it has internal heating blankets that will turn on when the BMS senses that the temperature is too low inside the battery, and it will heat up the battery. Now, I did some testing on this, and the internal heating elements draw about 11 amps. So many people have asked that question, never really got an answer, but I've tested it. It's about 11 amps. So if you charge this battery with 100 amps, if you charge this pack, let's just say this pack, now let's just say this one battery. If you have one battery and you charge this battery with 100 amps, it's going to take 10 amps, 10 to 11 amps to raise the internal temperature of this battery till it's ready to charge. Then it will allow the 100 amps to go into the battery. However, 90 will go to the battery, and 10 will probably continue to go to the internal heating blanket. Okay, we've got more on-off switches over here. We've got dip switches. The dip switches are contained in the manual here. Let me see if I can get this. Now to get mine to work, if you see on these groupings, on A there is 2 dip switches for A. Now A indicates the battery address selection. In my opinion, from my testing so far, it appears to me that this is for series. So if you're not going to run them in 12 volt parallel, I don't think you need to mess with this. I have both of them as host, which means both of them are off. So if you see on A there, both of them are down, which is off, which means both are hosts. All right, the next one is B, which is series and parallel selection. I have mine on, both of them on, which is parallel. Both are on and parallel. Yep. All right. And then C indicates the end of the battery pack, and I have mine on, which is not the end of the battery pack, I believe. So again, you can see, I believe it's on. Yes, it's on. So the way that this is written, and if anybody's ever dealt with dip switches, sometimes it get a little confusing, and you have to think about it a minute. So that's why I wrote these down, so you can reference them. Double check them yourself. Maybe I'm wrong. All right, so that's the dip switches. I think that you would use these a little bit differently if you were in series. I think. Call Epoch and verify with them. All right, let's go on to some other functions, which is the Victron Comms. What is Victron Comms? You know, you heard that term being used, and in all honesty, I just thought that they'd talk to the Victron. You'd be able to see some things on the Victron, on the Touch 50 or the Touch 70. I wasn't actually sure what that meant. And to be honest with you, I even ordered the batteries not really even knowing what that meant. And it took a lot of research to figure out in simple terms what that means. Yes, it does share information and data to the Victron system and the Touch 50, but it does more than that. So I have these other ones too. These are the 300 amp hour. These are actually going to a buddy. This is 12300A V2 is the model number. So what is V2? When I first bought these, I thought it was just the 12300A version 2 of this battery. No, from what I gather, again, I could be wrong, but from what I gather, V2 is Victron V2 BMS or CAN BMS protocol. Victron is an open source company. All the data and programs that they use and details they make available for everybody, including the V2 CAN bus protocol. So any battery manufacturer, if they are ambitious enough and technical enough, they can incorporate the V2 CAN bus protocol into their batteries. And so what that means is when you have a battery capable of the V2 CAN bus protocol, you can plug in, I think it's an RJ45. I'm not a computer expert. That was one of the things I had to learn. A communication cable, comm cable, into this port as you're facing it, the left port. That's what I got to work. You might find something different. Epoch might add to this and say you can do it a different way, but this is how I got it to work. So on the left port, comm cable there, and then it goes into the BMS CAN, which is not these top ones, it's these bottom ones down here. It's a little bit confusing, the bottom one. So BMS CAN. Now in this case, I actually bought a splitter for the two batteries to hook up to just to see if a splitter would work, and it does work. So I see both batteries with one plug. So in theory, you could add another one of these and 2 more batteries and see them all in here in the Touch 50. I should go ahead and plug one of those batteries in and make sure that that's true, and not that, like, say 2 is the limit. I don't think so, but that's not something I've confirmed yet. So once you get that going and you do a couple settings in the system on the Cerbo GX and on the Multiplus 2, then essentially what Victron Comms means is that the battery will now control all charging details and send that information to the Multiplus. So all commands in charging and charging control are set by the battery itself. In this case, the Epoch battery that has the V2 Victron communication protocol. If you didn't have a battery, let's just say that they made this battery without that, what you would have to do is you would have to have a shunt, and then you have to go in here and set up a lot of parameters. As a matter of fact, the best way to do it, in my opinion, and if anybody that gets a system, just go ahead and spend the money for this MK3 VE bus to USB, so you can plug it into your computer, make all the parameter changes in the Multiplus 2 parameters that will come up on that screen. We'll go into that in just a little bit. I got to show you some details on that and how I learned what this stuff is supposed to do. So that's how you would normally do it, but it takes a lot of effort to get this shunt set up right so that the battery registers 100% charge when it is actually charged, because this is just a counter. Let me see this right here. Let's look at this. So this is the Epoch information, this is the shunt information, and they're not the same, and I'll go into why they aren't the same in just a little bit. But so this is the state of charge of the batteries, and these are just counters. There's no way for the battery to tell what state of charge this is. You have voltages, you have amperages, these are charging right now, and you can get some information from that, but really those are just counters. So when you don't have the Victron V2 CAN bus protocol, you have to rely on a shunt. The shunt has to be set up. There's a whole lot of parameters that have to be done in here to get it to accurately charge correctly and realize, you know, for the Cerbo GX and the Multiplus, to realize that the battery is actually at 100% and it's now time to stop charging. It uses a combination of voltage, current, and other information as the battery is fully charging, and right at the top of the charge, the voltage starts to climb rapidly, the amperage starts to drop rapidly, and then you have to set a time for how long the Victron system sees that before it will reset to 100%, blah, blah, blah. With the CAN bus system, Victron CAN bus battery, you don't need any of that. As a matter of fact, this might come to surprise to some people, but it appears that all of those settings are irrelevant, completely irrelevant, and I'll show you that right now in the MK3 program. Let's see if we can go through this. So I have the MK3 device hooked up to the, let's just make sure what we got it hooked up to. It's called the VE bus, right there, top cable, connected to the MK3 into a USB on the computer. And then it will detect Cerbo GX Multiplus. Multiplus is what we want because that's actually the inverter charger. Okay, so make this screen big and then go to the gear up here, settings disabled, enable settings, password, ask you for password. Just a word of caution here. The reason why there's a password here, this password is contained in the online training in Victron. They didn't want anybody to just do this stuff on their own. They wanted Victron trained installers to do this type of setup. When you start going in here and messing around, make sure you know what you're doing, or at least research it in depth. Now, since then, Victron has relaxed that. Before, you couldn't even get warranty unless it was through an installer, and the reason why they did that is because they wanted a trained installer to install this stuff because it's so sophisticated and can be a little bit dangerous even. They only wanted certified installers, so that way if there was a warranty claim, that it could be checked and troubleshot by a certified installer. They've relaxed all that now. They kind of realized, I guess, they make a lot more money, and people are a little bit smarter. So the password is ZZZ. Hit OK. And so now we have setting capability. We've got general tab, grid, inverter, charger. We want to go to charger, and I'm going to show you. So here is where you set for lithium batteries. Okay, so right now it's set on lithium batteries, but do we need it set to lithium batteries? If we did not have a Victron COM CAN bus capable battery, we would have to set that to lithium batteries and then go through a whole list of setup items to make this work. So lithium batteries, the table below shows the effect of enabling or disabling lithium battery mode, but we're going to skip all this stuff, okay, and we're going to go to the bottom, and we're going to look right here. It says intelligent batteries connected to a GX device with DVCC enabled. Checking or not checking the box, meaning lithium batteries, doesn't matter. It has no effect. In a system with such a battery, all charger settings are overridden by parameters coming from the CAN bus. Examples are Victron lithiums with a Lynx BMS, BYD, Pylon Tech, MG Electronics, Freedom One, Redflow, and others. Now, these all listed here were certified by Victron to be compatible with the Cerbo system. Okay. Were certified by Victron to be compatible. Epoch is not on this list, but I think a year ago, more now, Victron stopped certifying because, again, this information is open source. Anybody that has the technical ability and the need can make a battery now with the Victron CAN bus incorporated, so there's a lot available to purchase. So Victron just doesn't have the time or energy to spend certifying 100 batteries from 100 different companies. So for this piece of information, hooking this up in this way does not invalidate the warranty for Victron stuff. So that's what the CAN bus is for. It's just plug and play, and it's just gonna, do essentially, again, this is for the Multi-Plus 2. The Multi-Plus 2 charging is essentially gonna do what the battery tells it to do. So all this stuff, charge current, absorption voltage, float voltage, repeated absorption level, absorption time, low temperature cutoff, charge current, and many more, there's a lot more than just this, are irrelevant. So it'll do what the Epoch tells it to do. So let's take a look at some other stuff. I have to disconnect this because, actually let me do it over here. When you have the MK3 hooked up, it will do some weird things. So when you hook up an MK3 and you're charging, don't worry about it. It's going to do some strange things. And so it takes a little while and it'll start to go back to normal. So let's go into here. So in order to take advantage of that and have it set up in the way that piece of information, we have to go the DVCC, which is distributed voltage current control. I believe that's what it is right here. Second page, DVCC enabled. Okay, it's disabled right there. Back to enabled. Now one word about that. So it says in that piece of information that the CAN bus from the Epoch battery will control everything. Not quite. There's actually a couple limits you can set manually in here. One of those is this maximum charge current. Okay, I think the maximum charge currents on these batteries are like 160, 200 amps. I don't remember what they are. It's a lot. But you can lower it low. You can't raise it. Epoch BMS will limit that, but you can lower it. If you want to charge it with a little bit lower amperage, you can do that. And also the maximum charge voltage is 13.8, and I've set this, and this is how I'm running it right now on the bench for various reasons. Controlling BMS is the Intrigue Epoch, so you have to set that, I believe. Okay, and then let's go back to menu, system setup, go to system setup. Battery monitor is another thing that I have set. The battery monitor is again set to the B12 volt 460 amp hour on CAN bus. That is one of the options. I also have the smart shunt, which is this. I could use that, but right now I have it set on the Epoch CAN bus as the controlling agent. So also when you see this, because the battery monitor is there, it shows 100%. Now this is not actually true right now, but this is what the Epoch battery shows, and that's not true. And I'll show you why that's not true and how sometimes the Epoch can be tricked a little bit, that the state of charge is not actually accurate. It's not a big deal, but it is useful to know in some circumstances. You get a lot of people saying, you know, on the golf carts or things like that, why did my cart die at 40%? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Sometimes it's for some reasons, other times it's for other reasons, but one of the reasons it could be is this. So I keep pointing to this Garmin because it's useful, and it's more useful to show or demonstrate what I'm about to demonstrate than this screen. Okay, on this side is Epoch information, 27.7 amps going in currently, 13.5 volts is what it's reading. This side is the shunt, the Victron shunt. So currently we have the total going into all the batteries through this shunt is 56 amps, 56.2, 56.8, and 13.6 volts. All right, so why does this read 27 and then bouncing to 37, and this is much more? It's because the total charge output in amps coming from the multiplus is going through this shunt into the batteries. This will show one current, which is the total current, which is this one. Get my hand out of the way, it keeps focusing on it. But in this one, it's actually showing each internal shunt of each Epoch BMS. Okay, now, and so of course this is basically half the value of this, because this battery is only getting 30 amps, this battery is getting 27, and that's exactly what it's doing. This is getting 30 something, this is getting high 20s. And just to illustrate something and why that is, we'll go over that now, but this toggling back and forth is showing each battery. So the system will show each battery. It shows it on here too, just in case you're wondering. 27, 30.4, 27.5, 30.5. So that is the information sent from the Epoch to the Victron and showing each individual battery bouncing back and forth. Why does it show two different charge amperages? Because this system is just set up, it's a mess, but it's all hooked up right, is set up on the bench just for me to set it up. So I used old cables that came from a different system just to set it up. I don't want to cut my new cables. I have a ton of cable and terminal ends on this, but I don't want to use any of that now, so I'm just using old cable. So in this case, this has a very short run of cable right here, very short positive negative. This has a very long cables. Okay, so this battery is getting current from the multiplus in charging mode through longer cables. This is getting it through shorter cables, and these are 4-aught cables, very good cables too, so the resistance is very low. However, it's the difference in resistance between these cables, is, as far as lithium batteries are concerned, is not negligible. In the old lead acids, that might not be too big of a deal, but anything with high current, it's going to show up and it's going to be a problem. So the one that is showing 27 amps is the long cables. It's not getting as much current to that battery, that far battery, as this one is, which is getting 30.4. So as you charge these, there's going to be a discrepancy in the state of charge of these two batteries as it charges up, and in discharging you'll get that same discrepancy. So one of these will hit the floor much quicker than the other if you've got long cables or different size cables. All right, so it's important to use something like a Lynx Power In, and this is actually a good deal for everything that it does. It's only 150 bucks, something like that, but it has everything you need in it. You can put up to 4 batteries on it, and you can configure it in different ways to do different things, but it's a nice unit. So when I finally install this in my boat, I will ensure that this cable, this cable, this cable, and this cable are all exactly the same length. Now, you don't really have to get all 4 cables exactly the same length. What you need is the positive and this positive to be the exact same length, this negative and this negative to be the exact same length. If this one was 2 feet, this one was 2 feet, this one was 3 feet, and this one was 3 feet, all going to a bus bar, that's actually okay. It's not a problem. And then you have your main cables coming out here. So just be aware of that. Cable length and use of bus bars is critical, especially in lithium batteries. So don't bypass that. And don't, this is not your old lead acid batteries. Continuing on, you need a Class T fuse at some point. Read up on a Class T fuse and why you need a Class T fuse with lithium batteries. It's really recommended. inside this Lynx power in, it also has individual fuses that are not Class T fuse, but very good fuses for each battery. You also want a cutoff switch somewhere, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to have a cutoff switch on each battery and then one going to the inverter, so that I can do maintenance on it or take a battery out of service or whatever, or disconnect the multi-plus while still powering up all the Victron stuff. Different reasons why you might need that. All right, let me see what else we got to cover. All right, one thing that I want to cover that I kind of already touched on once, but you know, this is just bench testing right now. So I've had this up and running for a couple weeks now, testing different things. But I would leave it every day, and I would shut off right here. I would shut off the inverter charger, so that everything, all this stuff was just running off of the batteries, and I would leave it day after day as I was working, and I would come back and I would check on things, and then I would charge the batteries again up to full. And there's a couple things that I noticed. All right, so let's go back into this settings, DVCC. All right, again, this maximum charge current and maximum charge voltage. So, and how that might be used with these Epoch batteries and this Victron V2 CAN bus protocol. So in these batteries and in the V2 CAN bus protocol from Victron, they have pre-warnings and they have warnings. All right, and also these batteries have recommended charge voltages and charge currents. I think it's actually 14.6 or 14.4 for these batteries. Let's see here. I don't remember where it is. It's somewhere in there. And it's in the manual as well. In my opinion, this is my opinion, you don't want to charge it at 14.4 or 14.6. Because what happens is I was getting a lot of codes from the Epoch batteries that were showing up on the Cerbo Touch 50 screen, and it was a very big annoyance. Okay, now the Epoch batteries themselves were not setting a code. Okay, if I were to pull up the app and I was getting a code on the Touch 50 and I pulled up the Epoch app, there was no code. So as far as Epoch's territory was concerned, the battery was behaving fine. It was within the parameters that the BMS wanted to see, but in the Victron protocol, it was out of bounds. It was setting a code, in my opinion, and sometimes in some of these codes were pre-warnings or codes that, in my opinion, the parameters were just too tight. So I was constantly getting these codes. All right, so what I did is I started backing down the charge voltage on this page right here, and the first one I went down to was I think 14, and that didn't do it. I was still getting codes, so I went down to 13.8, and I was able to charge the batteries up to essentially 100% and get no codes while charging, and it was much more user-friendly, especially with the Touch 50. There was no beeping going on, and you weren't getting these constant codes. And with the Victron system, you may get codes on your phone if you have messages forwarded, all this stuff. So it was a real pain in the butt. But again, lowering it to 13.8 made all the difference in the world. Now, you'll hear arguments on the internet about what you should charge these batteries to. In my opinion, I think 13.8 is actually fine anyways, because if you look at battery voltage charts and various other things, that's 99.5% charged. And going up to 14.6 doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. The key critical thing on making sure you get up in the voltage when charging is that the battery itself can go through some active balancing, and that always happens on modern BMSs, or at least the latest BMSs, I think, generally speaking, at the top of the charge. So I observed the app and the batteries to make sure that it was doing balancing, and it was. At the top of charge ranges, the top of the voltage on charge ranges, you can watch the cells on this on your app, and you'll see that they'll start to split. Instead of being 0.006 or 0.005, sometimes they'll be 0.012 or something like that at the top of the charge range. You'll also see that as they get very discharged, but that's okay, because once the charging stopped, the Epoch BMS started bringing them back in line, and then they went right back to 0.006, 0.007. So it was balancing. So in my opinion, 13.6, 13.8 is probably all you want to do. In addition, not going to 14.6 all the time. has benefits for longevity of the battery and charge cycles. One other thing that I also use this for, especially the charge voltage. On the bench here, I've been setting this up and monitoring it. So I've been keeping it at 13.8, and that, again, as I said earlier, that's essentially 99.9% charge, 99.5% charge, something like that. But on my boat, I have it at the slip most of the time. I don't want to keep it at 99.5% all the time. There's some information, some research that says that keeping it at the top of the charge range will reduce the total number of cycles, life cycles, that this battery is good for. Probably not much, but it's something. It could be, 500 cycles or something like that. Keeping it at the top of the charge. I don't know. We don't even really know that information yet. But I found that what I'm going to do is I will take this right here, click that twice. I will lower this to about 13.3 or maybe even 13.2. And then you will see this start to come down. All right, so, and then the system will kind of idle and settle down, and you'll see that it will remain approximately, I don't know, 50 to 60% charged, which is perfect. That's how they ship them. That's how they store them. So if you're going to go into storage mode, I would suggest just setting this to 13.2, 13.3. So we're going to go back up because we're charging at 13.8. And then you'll see that ramp up again shortly. Actually, you'll see it on both. You can kind of hear the multi-plus ramp up. Very nice equipment. And now we're back to charging. So that's how I plan to use it when I'm away from the boat. I don't want the batteries to be low. I want them to be probably around 50, 60, 70%. I'll play with it because I do want a lot of capacity in there, because these batteries will run my bilge pump. So I don't want them super low. I want them 50, 60%, 70% maybe. And if a storm was approaching, like a hurricane like we have down here in Florida in Tarpon Springs, I'll probably charge them to full, right up to 100% just prior to that, so that I have all the possible capacity in case the bilge pump needs to work overtime if water's coming in. There's that portion of it. Let's go to one final thing, which is a slight criticism of the Epoch batteries. And I have talked to them about this, and they said they're going to correct it. They may not be able to correct it. He said he was going to look into it, but they might not be able to correct it. So right now we have 56 amps coming in through the shunt. Each battery is getting approximately, say, 28 amps charging. All right, so let's shut off the charging. Let's watch the two. Again, this is the shunt, this is the Epoch. All right, and you notice the one on the left says 1.5 amps. The ones on the right are toggling between the batteries, and neither battery sees anything. This problem, minor problem, took quite a bit of time for me to figure out. I calibrated my shunt by disconnecting this to ensure that it had no output, and then there's a spot in the I think it's in here to calibrate the shunt. So the shunt has been calibrated, and this is accurate. This 1.5 amps is accurate. As a matter of fact, I have a meter right here. Let's double check it. We got our meter. So we have 1.75 amps, and we have 1.5. Close enough. One thing I've noticed in reading and research and all this stuff is shunts and these types of meters are not always the most accurate. You just want them pretty close. So anyways, that is more close than this. Okay, so why is 1 0? Let me put this away. Why is 1 0? Why does one read 1.5? Well, obviously, as I said earlier, this one reads the full value. These should read half the value. So this should read 0.7, 0.8, something like that, but it's not. It's reading 0. So what I found out by testing with a power supply and some other means is that the Epoch battery shunt will not read anything below 1 amp. So the threshold for the Epoch to see any current through it, charging or discharging, is 1 amp. So anything that's under 1 amp is just not going to see it. All right, so that creates a small problem if you happen to idle your system right around this current draw. In this case, I just got lucky that my Garmin and this equipment itself draws approximately 1.5 or 1.7 amps. And so it sits here when I go to work all day, every day. And that actually creates a problem the way it's set up, because the Epoch registers nothing, the shunt registers 1.5 amps. And as you see, you can see the state of charge of both of these is different. So after about 3 or 4 days of sitting here, maybe 4 or 5 days, the shunt is showing an 88% state of charge. The Epoch is still showing 100% state of charge. Now the Epoch is incorrect on this particular spot. The shunt is more accurate. And I had rigged up a little load here, which is just this little fan. Turn on the fan, and now we see 1.8, and it's going to toggle between the two and 1.9. So you can see we're over 1 amp, and the Epoch will see that amp draw, and that equals roughly 3.3 amps that is registered by the shunt. So that's a little minor problem. For that reason, I actually would suggest still incorporating this shunt as like a backup I don't know, meter to compare everything off. And in some cases, if you needed to, if you had some kind of problem, like you were missing a cable or something happened while you're out cruising around, you can then, through setting these parameters, you can revert back to this shunt controlling the multiplus to control the battery charging. So it's like a backup battery charging system. And then even if this goes out, there's a third way to do it with just the multiplus 2, but I think that's the least accurate. But it'll still get the job done, just not that accurately. So that is a little bit of a problem. In this shunt on the Victron, you can actually set what the bottom threshold is. Victron warns to not set it too low, because noise in the cables and other things can, if you set it too low, can cause its own error. So I have this set to 0.25, I believe, in the Victron system. I can't change what's in the Epoch as a threshold. So I talked to Epoch about that, and hopefully they incorporate it or lower it down to 0.5 amp or something like that. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this, but it probably needs to be lower than 1 amp. Now, is this going to be a problem in real life? I doubt it, because if this were on my boat right now, I'd always be drawing over 1 amp. And then when it goes into charge mode, or I would always be charging over 1 amp. So I doubt this is going to lead to some type of discrepancy in the real world, but there are circumstances, as you just saw, where it could. If you had this happen, one remedy would be to, put a fan or a light bulb or something that's drawing just more than 1 amp or 2 amps, and it will allow the Epoch to register just enough, or make it 0. If you're going to go away from the boat or something, make it 0. Shut everything down. That's another thing you can do if you go away from the boat. Instead of setting this at 13.2, 13.3, you can just shut everything down, because these things will hold a charge for quite a while. But ensure that it does not have any draws on it. Of course, that's one of the nice things about being able to shut a battery off. Let me see if there's anything else we need to cover. Okay, just to show a couple more things. This is the information given from the Epoch battery to the Cerbo. Details, some cell voltage, highest cell voltage, minimum cell temperature, battery modules, installed available capacity. One says 460, one says 484. For some reason this toggles to 458, but that's not it. Once I start charging, it goes to 484, and that's what the battery itself says on the app. So it's 484, which is not surprising. Either way, it's a whole lot of capacity. So there's that in there. Here's the alarm. So here you see this one is not a real fault or alarm, because that was when I had the MK3 hooked up. But if you go back over here, high voltage. This was a couple days ago. 1826, 1826, 1826, 1825, 1825. So this thing was just going off non-stop. High voltage, high voltage, high voltage. And those are the alarms that I was talking about, which I got rid of by setting the DVCC maximum charge voltage is 13.8. So if anybody's running into that, that's how I think you would get around with that. All right, I think that's all I know right now. So there's a couple things. People are going to buy these batteries and they're going to buy those batteries and they're going to use them. They're going to hook up the CAN BMS ports with the Victron protocol. And they're going to have some issues here and there. They're going to have alarms. They're going to have other things. They're going to have discrepancies on this stuff. But keep in mind, most of the information that you will find to resolve these are going to be in the Victron space. They're going to be in the Victron online space. There is a tremendous amount of resources out there on Victron. A couple of my favorite is Off Grid Garage. I've learned a lot from him. Marine How To, which I think is Rod Collins' site. He's got a wealth of information on there about lithium batteries and different things. Off Grid Garage is very good for the Victron stuff, and there's just dozens of other ones. Don't limit your search to marine stuff. I really think the off-grid guys are the ones that have the most and best information because they're always experimenting. And when you have these problems, you're going to have to research them because the battery itself is a good battery, right? We still need a little bit of information from Epoch on a few things here and there, and they're working on that. But even the V2 CAN bus protocol contained in this battery belongs to Victron. So like these alarms that I'm getting, that appears, in my opinion, to be a Victron thing. And that's why the latest I heard was Epoch was talking to Victron how to calm those alarms down. In my opinion, just set the voltage lower. But I have no doubt that these will be refined. But most of your solutions to any of your problems are going to be contained by researching Victron information. Okay, so when you turn the app on, if you're not getting any faults, that is the territory of Epoch. If you're getting faults on here but not in the app, that is the territory of Victron and how they've set up this V2 CAN bus protocol. So there's a lot to work through on this. It's a tremendous amount of information. I really wish I would have found that blurb that we discussed earlier in there about selecting once you hook this up, selecting lithium batteries doesn't mean squat because it's going to be on everything's going to be directed by the CAN bus, because I spent days researching how to set up the shunt and get these things to charge correctly, which is still information I'm glad to know, because if I ever have to resort back to the shunt to start controlling the batteries, it's good to know. But the problem with Victron stuff, and I absolutely love all this Victron stuff, it's capable of so much. But the problem with Victron is that it's capable of so much. And so there is a tremendous amount of information out there that's very, very hard to go through. And in many cases, it's very disorganized because it covers so much ground to find out what you actually need for your system. So my recommendation for that is to, I guess start with this video, research the things that I've said here, and then branch out from there. There's so much more to this Victron stuff. And you just have to keep researching, you just have to keep reading, you just have to keep playing with parameters. And pretty soon, a picture forms in your mind, and then you have a good handle on it. But you have to, if you think you're going to hook all this stuff up quickly and perfectly understand it, you're mistaken. You have to do some homework on this system. I'm a long-time technician. I've worked on jets, airplanes, helicopters, military stuff since 1987. Okay, a lot of technical stuff. This was very technical. This was a lot of information. I've been to a lot of technical schools taught by other people. This was actually a bit of an undertaking. It wasn't, don't get me wrong, it's perfectly doable, but it's not the type of thing you're going to read this, that, and the other thing, and then you're going to start doing everything perfectly. You have to do some homework on this. Again, that's why Victron wanted trained personnel only to touch this kind of stuff. So sorry for the quality of the video, but I had to get this out because I know that there were people out there that had bought these batteries or those batteries and might be struggling through this. And again, everything that I have done may not be perfect or the best practice. There might be other ways to use these ports, to use these dip switches, to set this up in a different way, to refine it a little bit better. So if you have any additional information or input, please put it in the comments below, or correct any misinformation that I might have stated here. A wise person once said, I don't want to be wrong for a minute longer than I have to be. So if there's something I've said here, by all means correct it, okay? So anyways, I think that's it. Anything that I learn additional, I will put it out on a video, and hopefully everything works good. Now that I've made this video, I can disassemble this and get everything ready to put it in the boat. So hopefully the next video is starting to install this in the boat. I gotta find a place to put these monsters, but at least they're waterproof, and I have a much higher selection of areas to put these in the boat. They might go down below in the bilge, not in the bottom of the bilge, at the top of the engine room, away from the heat. So anyways, if you find this information useful, make sure you like and subscribe, please, and I'll keep putting out videos and sharing whatever I know. So all right.